Something that's remained pretty consistent within Mario games is how enemies can be taken down by many different methods. Of course, the way these enemies attack you will vary in difficulty when it comes to how effective they are at damaging you, but lots of these guys will just die when you jump on them one time or throw one fireball at them. There's exceptions to this, of course. Some of these bigger guys will require a ground pound to kill, or multiple hits from a fire flower, or a completely different power-up altogether, like Dry Bones in New Super Mario Bros. Wii and U, notably being vulnerable to the ice flower. Who else was on Cloud 9 after they were able to kill these guys for the first time without a superstar or a power block? Disgusting boned creature, get out of my sight. Or Cheep Cheeps dying to fireballs regardless of the environment they're in, all the way back to their introduction in Super Mario Bros. 1.
Hey, if we're underwater, how could there be a...
Then there's enemies who are a cut above these guys, the guys who don't go down no matter what you throw at them. It's like you mean to tell me this guy is more resilient than Bowser? I might need some changes in hierarchy, man, I don't know. So I wanted to go over every completely unkillable, undefeatable, indestructible enemy in all the mainline Mario games. This will be listed in a way where whatever enemy I mentioned at its designated time will mean it's only unkillable in the specific game that I'm mentioning it in. Like one enemy could be literal god in Super Mario Bros. 3, but total fodder in a future game. As always, shout out to the Super Mario Wiki for doing an incredible job at compiling specific information together about these Mario games in an organized manner, which helps greatly for making videos like these. Oh yeah, like and subscribe so Fishing Boo doesn't come get you while you're sleeping.
Relax, man. I was just gonna shoot you in the head and kill you.
Super Mario Bros. 1 being the first of its kind, understandably designed many of its enemies in a way where they just get taken down in one hit. Even with how much of a pain in the ass Hammer Bros were in that game especially, one fireball or jump still took them out. The only enemy that was completely immune to death in this game is the Potaboo, which was eventually renamed to the more iconic Lava Bubble enemy in Super Mario World. There's nothing Mario can do against these guys other than avoid them and pray to God. Though I do find it interesting these guys are classified as enemies in this game and not obstacles, because there is technically a difference. You know, fire bars and bullet bill cannons are classified as obstacles, for example, but are also unkillable. I figured to be an enemy you needed to have, you know, a face or at least eyes, which these guys didn't have until Mario World. Yeah, don't worry, buddy, you'll be able to get them in a few years. Since the Lost Levels acted as a direct sequel to Mario 1 as well as coming out in Japan less than a year after the first game released in Japan, it's understandable how not much would change in the Lost Levels, both in graphic style and enemy variety. There was more of a focus on making the levels challenging than adding tons of new content. So only 2 new enemies in the Red Piranha Plant and Sky Blooper were added, but they were both killable. Also, the element of wind was an obstacle. Actually, I guess you could sort of count the poison mushroom, depending on the person you ask. I sort of count it as a false power-up personally, but I'll acknowledge it anyway to cover more bases here, because when I made that weakest power-ups video, a lot of people were not happy about the poison mushroom being put on there because it sort of acts as an enemy, and I honestly get it, so yeah. Mario 2 was one of the strangest games ever in the sense that it introduced a combination of so many iconic enemies that are still used in modern titles to this day, like Shy Guy, Birdo, and Ninja, while also adding some of the most obscure enemies that have never been seen since. Ostro, he's so close, yet so far. But the only enemy that's kind of unkillable by traditional means is Phanto, yet he doesn't even completely count because if you use a combination of a superstar and a stopwatch, he dies, leaving the only true unkillable enemy, the whale. Super Mario Wiki classifies this creature as a platform, funny enough, but because it has eyes, it doesn't die, and spouts water that can damage you, I'm making an exception. And with how hilariously strong the hammer suit is in Mario 3, most enemies will just die to either this or the star, the only 2 exceptions being those laser Bowser statues that only appear in the final castle, the Stretch Boo enemies, which are like a Boo platform hybrid, and the Gelectro, who only appear at underwater levels. I'd say these guys are the least intimidating of the 3, because while they do travel in groups, they just sit there and never move. I know Mario Bros. 2 has its strange set of enemies, but the Mario Land games easily take the cake for the most uncanny bunch of all. Majority of these guys have been lost to time for a while, but some of them seem to be getting another chance at life in Mario Kart World as track hazards. Mario Land 1 only has 2 things that can't die, one being the giant orb that circles the area in the Dragon Zamasu fight. Isn't that a Dragon Ball character, by the way? With the other being those pipe fists, which serve like half enemies, half obstacles of sorts. Mario Land 2 brings these enemies back, only now they're bigger and modeled after Wario's gloves. As for the new ones, there's these evil-looking stars that serve similar functions to the Gelectro, where they travel in groups but don't move a whole lot. Small and giant-sized Piranha Plant statues are a thing too, serving a similar purpose to the Mario 3 Bowser statues, just shooting fire forward instead of lasers, as well as the Wakiri, Furiko, Furizo, and Karamenbo. Wakiris are simple saw blades that move back and forth, kind of like the ones you see in Galaxy 2's Puzzle Point Galaxy. Furizos and Furikos are these giant spiked ball pendulum type enemies that sway back and forth, while the Karamenbos are this game's version of a Thwomp, just faceless with longer bodies. With the renaissance of Super Mario World, Thwomp's time to shine was finally here. Completely unkillable, avoid at all costs. A fishing boo, you sly little devil. As I mentioned previously, there's nothing you can do against this thing either. You can spin jump on them to avoid damage, but they don't actually die. I'm glad these guys got some rep in Mario Run, but it'd be cool to see them again in a mainline home console game. I always like how their designs looked like a subspecies of Lakitu. The now renamed lava bubbles are in the same boat again in this game, where they can't actually die, but using a spin jump on their heads will still make it safe. Other boo variants can't take damage either. Those boo circles that are all over ghost houses act more like obstacles, but by extension don't take damage. Same goes for those boos that can reform as blocks, and the boos that fly around in the air in large groups who occasionally try to dive bomb you. Bowser's statues return in the game's final council as well, where the normal ones can't take any damage, yet their gold forms can die if lured into lava pits. Which I kinda like, because since the game would spawn more than one at you on top of them having homing properties, maybe making those unkillable on top of having standard statues in the same area would have been overkill in the difficulty department for casuals. With the release of Super Mario 64, lots of classic Mario enemies and fresh faces were given more depth to shine with this incredible 3D sandbox. Goombas could home in onto you, Chain Chomps were bigger than ever, and Lakitu took on a career in cinematography. To circle back to Chain Chomp, the one and only in this game can't technically be killed or defeated. The one star that involves this enemy has you breaking the post it's tied to so it can freely roam the rest of the world. The Super Mario 64 is tricky with these kinds of enemies because of how different the DS remake works compared to any other port or remake of a mainline title. The Bubba, Thwomp, Foosh, Flamethrower, and Toxbox enemies are all unkillable in the original, but have ways to be defeated in the remake. Bubbas and Thwomps can die if you're collecting a Mega Mushroom, Foosh and Flamethrowers can be eaten by Yoshi, and Wario can beat Toxboxes with either an inside jump or a punch. We can all agree the blue variant of Thwomp is the best Thwomp design, right? It's thanks to him we're blessed with the classic. A new Thwomp will never have as much sauce, I just don't think it will. Grindle and Spindles, who are like Thwomp cousin enemies, can't be killed either. They only appear inside the Shifting Sandlands pyramid though. Big Boo's Haunts, Rabid Piano, of course, can't be killed. Very notorious enemy for jump scaring first time players. Feels like all the creepypastas people have related to Mario always seem to involve this musical abomination. Amps are also little bastards that are untouchable and have that stun effect to them whenever they damage you. Not sure why these guys got to stay invincible while the Flamethrowers didn't, since they feel like they're part of the same family, but whatever. Heave-Hoes are just obnoxious. They're like more annoying Cataquacks from Sunshine. Not only do they not die, but they'll send you in the opposite direction you're facing than instead of straight upwards like the Cataquacks do, which makes getting your previous footing back a lot more disorienting. And look at him, he's smiling the entire time while doing this, knowing he can't die.
I hate you! I want to kill you in death in your shallow grave! That's my game plan!
A lot of the underwater enemies in this game just can't be touched. It's pretty strange. Bub's the smaller version of the Bubba and is oddly stronger than its big brother in terms of durability, in the sense that he's also unkillable in the DS version because it's impossible to get a Mega Mushroom in the world this enemy exists in by normal means. Same goes with the shark-like enemy Sushi, the Maw Ray formerly known as Unagi, the Manta Ray whose rings you swim through for a star, and the Clambies. While those guys can offer some nice collectibles, they can still damage you like an enemy if you linger for too long and don't die. Oh yeah, I almost forgot the Bumps, counting them as unkillable enemies in the base game because they have eyes but didn't have eyes in the remake for whatever reason. I feel like it couldn't have been that hard in theory to throw some googly, goofy eyes on these guys again. I'll always have a soft spot for Sunshine. Even if some of its gameplay elements didn't age very well, the actual location of Isle Delfino combined with the unique design take on older enemies like Koopas, Cheep Cheeps, and Bob-Ombs was something I can at least respect. Even if these newer designs aren't my personal favorites in the world, like in Super Mario World, if you feel like Mario could struggle against a certain enemy, when in doubt, pick Yoshi, and that's kind of the same thing with Sunshine. But there's some that even Yoshi can't really deal with, like Blue Pads, those blooper variants that are only seen in Rico Harbor Episode 1. Spraying them with Flood turns them into platforms for about 15 seconds, but they turn back to normal right after that. Red and blue wire traps were also a pain for me to deal with in Bianco Hills and Noki Bay specifically. They're only found on tight ropes and take no damage from anything. They feel like enemies that should be able to be eaten by Yoshi, but as far as I'm aware, cannot be. The only other ones I could sort of count are the 3 chain chomplets and the giant chain chomp, which are technically beatable in the missions they appear in, but don't actually die or disappear from the screen after the fact. Considering Sunshine is one of the tougher mainline games out there, at least to 100%, it's interesting how just about every single enemy has some kind of weakness to exploit. Since New Super Mario Bros. DS and the many other titles to share its name served as a safe reboot to 2D Mario, a lot of the enemies that appeared in these games were ones that existed in prior titles. There were some new faces, yeah, whoever designed these guys deserves a raise, but as for unkillable enemies, it's just the Mega Maw Ray that appears in a couple water levels and technically the lava bubble reverting to its faceless self. Every other enemy that looks like it could be invincible can either be beaten by a Mega Mushroom or one of the other power-ups. Super Mario Galaxy is kind of a reverse Sunshine when it comes to what we're talking about today. The game isn't that hard, but had quite a bit of unkillable enemies, both in the forms of new ones and returning ones. To quickly breeze through the returning, the Bomps, Amps, Clambies, regular Thwomps, the Bone Twisters, not to be confused with the Twisters from Paper Mario, and Toxboxes are all still unkillable, some of whom were always unkillable while others simply reverted back to their original states, like the Toxboxes. A handful of new ones are indestructible as well, like the Sentry Beams, who I used to semi-clickbait this thumbnail with. I think these were the first new enemies in the game that were introduced as unkillable, at least they were in my first playthrough when I was a kid. I remember trying every possible thing to damage them and thought maybe there was something I wasn't getting, but in reality, they just can't die. Best you can do is stun their laser attack by standing on their head. Water and fire shooters, who look like they could have been designed by Professor Egad, can't be killed. The water ones in particular can actually be more useful than harmful given the situation, as they can teleport you to areas you wouldn't normally be able to get to. But the fire ones just burn you, so avoid the area of effect whenever you can. Spring vaults, sentry garages, and pulse beams all feel like they come from the same, top man type species. Spring vaults and pulse beams generate shockwaves, but only the spring vault can be jumped on, while the sentry garage will spawn top minis to disorient your movement, but not actually damage you directly. There's also the eye beamers from Dusty Dune and Dreadnought Galaxy, and the spring from Boo's Boneyard. Those could be classified more like obstacles, but because they have eyes, or, one singular eye in the eye beamer's case, I'm gonna count these guys anyway. A common trend with this game feels like if it has some kind of laser attack, you probably can't do anything. To segue right into Galaxy 2, it added a decent bit of new enemies despite being the only 3D Mario sequel to exist on the same console as its predecessor. Some of my personal favorites are the Romps, who only appear in Slipsand Galaxy, and the Flomps from Bowser Galaxy stages / Grandmaster Galaxy. Thwomp variants are some of my favorite enemy subspecies in Mario games, so I'm glad Nintendo, keeps giving them more over time. Zot nozzles are electric versions of the fire and water shooter added to Space Storm Galaxy only. These guys just straight up made it a floodhead, and it's not even subtle either. It has the word nozzle in its name and everything. Spine cones are these cute little hermit crab enemies whose shells are too strong to penetrate. I wouldn't even want to kill these guys anyway, they're too cute. Magmars and Magmaws are the prime enemy types in Melty Monster Galaxy, who are completely made of lava. They're variants of Blargs from Super Mario World, but stronger since nothing kills them and they cover more area. Boos sorta got buffed in this game because even though they behave exactly like Galaxy 1 Boos, they're all placed in galaxies where strong sources of light don't exist. By extension, the new Octumba variant, Octoboos, can't die either. So all you can do is move them around with your spin. Or those spiky gummits that only appear in Chimp Challenge missions can't be defeated either, as they spawn in areas where only spinning is allowed. Finally, the Mattermouth, which are giant dry bone head enemies that constantly eat the floor around certain areas. Jumping on them can stun them for a brief moment, but nothing else will ease their hunger. New Super Mario Bros. Wii is another game I'll always have a soft spot for, as someone who comes from a family where I'm basically the lone gamer. New Super Wii was one of the few games I got to enjoy with siblings and cousins on a regular basis, even replaying it with them on a couple occasions growing up. But in terms of unkillable enemies, there's only a few in this game. A Clamby is back once again, can't be touched. King Bill was a new addition to Mario altogether, dethroning the Bonsai Bill as the deadliest form of a bullet bill to date. Brother just plows through everything in its path, nothing you can do. I mean, you can sort of cheese kill these guys if one is spawned as you touch the end flagpole, but that's about it. Big Wiggler from the first New Super Mario Bros. Is back, but I'm only really counting it here because in the DS game, they acted more like permanent moving platforms that only went in one direction, while in New Super Wii, they move in a more unorthodox fashion and have the ability to inflict damage. I always felt like 3D Land was a really underrated single-player experience. It was really experimental in a sense because it combined how most 2D Mario levels were created, but the added 3D allowed for some really immersive sections. However, if you're looking for a game with lots of unkillable enemies, this is not the one. Only enemy that's unkillable is the returning Magmarg from Galaxy 2, but at least he's a cool one to bring back. New Super Mario Bros. 2 falls into the same space as 3D Land with only one unkillable enemy, but it's a brand new one, the Behemoth. It's basically the Boo equivalent of a King Bill, so big it fills up the majority of the screen and nothing can hurt it. Previously, invincible enemies became more fodder in this game with the additions of power-ups like the Gold Flower and Invincibility Leaf, so the fact that the Behemoth can still get around those is kinda wild. I'm glad this enemy was brought back as a stage hazard in Mario Kart World's Boo Theater track. I always liked its design. New Super Mario Bros. U brought back some old invincible faces like the Magmars, Magmaws, King Bills, Giant Wigglers, and kind of Thwomps, unless you're playing the game in boost mode. The Bowser Stunner statue, I believe, is the only new enemy from this game that can't die. Every other enemy is vulnerable to the Superstar, another weaker power-up, or another specific way of jumping ground pounding. Super Mario 3D World is one of the only games where its invincible enemies were all new species never before seen until this game dropped. The big ant troopers work in similar ways to the big wigglers. Moving around the stages and jumping on them can grant some extra height, but even power-ups like the star, invincibility leaf, and invincibility bell don't do anything to them. Charvargs are part of the Blarg family with a more draconic appearance, and just like their cousins, can't be defeated by anything, being one of the few enemies that can one-shot you through a power-up actually. The other being the Fuzzy Horde found in levels like Fuzz Time Mine. Ring Burners are like reskinned versions of Galaxy's Spring Vault enemy, just with a skull designed on top instead of eyes. The Grumplump is another one that, depending on the person you ask, can be classified as an obstacle, but once again, he's got a face and can't die, so I'm mentioning him anyway. As for Bowser's Fury, technically the only quote-unquote enemy that side mode added that's unkillable are the corrupt kitten / mother cat whenever Fury Bowser starts rampaging. The once friendly bunch gets corrupted and will chase Mario around if he's close enough to their field of vision. They can't be defeated, but do revert back to their normal selves once Fury Bowser is defeated or is forced away until further notice. Some people are still not aware of this, but both Mario Maker 1 and 2 were confirmed to be mainline Mario games as of Mario's 35th anniversary in 2021. These games even introduced new enemy variants like the Stiletto Goomba, the Zappa Mecha Koopa, and mega versions of older enemies like the Rocky Wrench. But because of the way these games work, where whoever is designing a level is essentially God, enemies that would normally be undefeatable in the versions you can use them in can be defeated because of custom POW block placements or conveyor belts forcing enemies to fall to their deaths. For example, Mario Maker 2 has giant versions of the horned ant troopers from 3D World. While these guys would be unkillable if they existed in normal 3D World, POW blocks or having them fall to their deaths from pipes can do the job just fine. If there's anything that truly cannot die in these games, let me know, but as far as I'm aware, everything has a weakness in a game where you're the master of your own levels. Super Mario Run feels like a weird combination of being super casual friendly because it's a mobile game, but also feeling obscure from the outside looking in because Mario was a console-only character for so long. People definitely mess with it though, because as of September 2018, the game had been installed on about 300 million devices worldwide. With the limited enemy selection combined with all of them being returning ones with the exception of the Poison Bubble, including the returning Fishing Boo who can die from getting jumped on now just like a regular Lakitu. Odyssey completely changed how Mario interacts with enemies with the introduction of the capture feature, so a lot of the time the need to even defeat an enemy becomes an afterthought because capturing them then leaving them alone makes the game more fun, at least for me. Older enemies like the Tai Fu got buffed, with power-ups like the Superstar not being in Odyssey. These guys can be captured but not killed by any means. Pulse beams from the Galaxy games are back but with a more simplified design, black, smaller, and only one spike on top, but still unleash shockwaves and don't die all the same. Same with Maw Rays, their look in Odyssey is so good by the way. As for new enemies, the only ones that can't be captured or die are the Bite Frost from the Snow Kingdom. They hide in the snow and stretch out to bite Mario for damage. I'm also gonna count / give an honorable mention to the Ruined Dragon Lord of Lightning, as even though you defeat it for a multi-moon, it doesn't actually die or disappear, because when returning to the Ruined Kingdom for extra power moons, he's still just chilling there at the top of the tower. You can even talk to him where he says how tired he is after the previous fight.
I am so lonely.
Me too, buddy. Me too. Super Mario Bros. Wonder currently remains my favorite 2D Mario game of all time. The way this game was able to essentially reinvent the 2D Mario formula in the most creative ways possible never ceases to amaze me, both with how the levels play and how expressive the playable characters are now. Wonder being the first game since Super Mario Land 2 to take place outside the Mushroom Kingdom region was an added bonus, as adding tons of new enemy species felt more seamless in a sense to not, rewrite the ecological canon of the Mushroom Kingdom. I know they could have easily said screw it and put these new faces in the Mushroom Kingdom, but I'm glad they didn't. The thing with this game too is, with the Wonder Flower effects, certain enemies were given new types or forms that only exist there. There's some that only appear during these effects that can be defeated before grabbing a Wonder Seed, while others just auto-vanish from the screen once a Wonder Seed is collected. The enemies that auto-vanish I'm going to count as unkillable, so I wanted to clear that up first. So while singular Bull Rushes can be defeated with power-ups like the Elephant Fruit, the Wonder Bull Rush herd never stops moving to destroy anything in their path. They can still damage you, but also help you move forward into whatever Wonder sections they appear in. Both the regular and Wonder Hoppos are completely immune too. The game classifies these guys as enemies, yet they just kind of vibe, unable to damage you and can serve as jump boosted platforms when stuck in between gaps. The Wonder Smackerel is our first example of a singular enemy type that can't die by normal means within a Wonder effect it appears in. This guy is just too big to receive any damage, so a Wonder Seed is the only thing to make it disappear. Same applies to the Big Hoppy Cats, Wonder Missile Megs, Wonder Bloomps, Wonder Conks, Wonder Shubba, the Lakitu Trio, and the Wonder Nosher Horde. Figured I'd just group these guys together to avoid sounding overly repetitive. Thwomps are once again invincible to everything, regardless of whatever Wonder effect is at play, as well as their new subspecies, Shoomps. Both the regular and big-sized ones are unkillable, swaying back and forth as their means of damage. The implication these guys are supposed to be baby versions of Thwomps because they have binkies in their mouths is the most adorable thing I've ever seen. Wonder is also the first game to add King Boo as an enemy in a 2D Mario game, appearing twice in the levels Light Switch Mansion and Bowser's Rage stage. But because he's tied to a Wonder effect in a non-castle level, I can't really consider him a boss. Plus, he's one of the disappear only after the Wonder Seed is collected type of enemies, so I'm counting him as unkillable in this game. Yellow and blue conchs are unkillable just like their bigger Wonder father. I kinda wish these enemies got more use because of how they felt like a new take on thwomps with a twist, having pseudo homing capabilities yet can be used as platforms due to the lack of spikes on their faces. Then we have the Big Note Piranha Plant that only appears in the final boss fight. While the smaller ones can be defeated by elephant fruits or bubble flowers, the big ones are invincible to everything, so all you can do is use the floor underneath you to super jump over them whenever they appear. Finally, as a quick honorable mention, some people believe Rift Mario is unkillable. However, other creators like Infinite Bits prove this enemy can die if hit by Fire Flower's fireballs 50 times. Once again, gotta give props to the developers for even including a possibility like this with an enemy. Stuff like this is a great way to further incentivize experimental gameplay rather than completing levels in the most standard ways possible. Definitely a stacked yet lovable cast of demons we got here. Can't say I hate or even dislike any of them because while they are unkillable, they're still designed in ways that don't make them feel cheap. Whether it be glued to a very specific movement type or at least stunnable so their attacks aren't constantly pressuring you. But if there's one thing I've learned from this video, it's that more enemies need to be given baby forms with binkies in their mouths. God, he's so cute!